At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Super NES Podcast, episode number 171 for you. As always, this is Greg, joined by my co-host Joe.
Hello.
And we were doing a audible here of this episode for you. We were supposed to have a guest host with us today, but that guest host unfortunately had some technical issues on its end. So we had to reschedule. So we had to reschedule him and Wonder Project J for a future podcast in the future. But the audio issues did get eventually. The audio issues eventually did get fixed, but there wasn't enough. But yeah, we decided it was probably just best to hold off at this point and record the episode next month. So we're doing an audible here of this. You may remember a while back, Joe and I did a bonus episode where Joe talked about some games with Super NES that he really enjoyed that already had been covered in the podcast. So we're gonna do that again. Just so we can have an episode like out for you guys. So, and besides, this is fine. This, we plan to do this again eventually anyway because there's a lot of games that cover in the podcast that Joe's not here for. Yeah. So, yeah. And Joe also brings a different perspective to the table. Being Genesis kid, so his experience with these games is not the same as like mine. So it's definitely
very true.
But last time we mostly agreed upon the games.
Yep.
Much to my surprise. Let's see if that happens again. So Joe and I have already talked about off mic 5 games to bring to the table. So go ahead with your first games then, Joe.
All right, well, let's get the easy one out of the way. Street Fighter 2.
That's fine. It's confusing. The whole franchise, the names Capcom gives their franchises it's like what the hell are you guys smoking over there, Capcom?
And on top of that, you had what? Street Fighter 2 Turbo Edition was the one that was released for the Super Nintendo.
There are 3 Street Fighter games in Super NES, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, there was Super Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2, but it was I can't remember if it was like Turbo or something along those lines.
Something like that.
And then it was the Alpha series, the first one.
Yep.
So
we're talking about the very first game,
right?
Street Fighter 2.
Right, so. Street Fighter 2. The only reason I mentioned that I think it's the Turbo Edition because the Genesis version, which is the one I grew up with, is different. It is the Championship Edition, which includes Bison and Vega and Balrog.
Yes. Capcom. Yeah, Capcom like Konami had the size and people available on hand to make different games, and they're just like by not just have to rely upon the straight ports. So yes. So yes, you do have that going for it. But anyway, yeah, Street Fighter 2. Yeah, this is the system's killer app. This is what sold like those systems. So obviously, you must have seen this like a friend's house. Friend's house then back in the day, then Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So this game is this is one of those that's easy to talk about, but it's also hard to analyze because you basically get the arcade experience here in your home, and really for the first time, like almost, besides some animations, like you're almost getting a 1-for-1 treatment here. And it's done really well. I have no complaints. Unfortunately, Super Nintendo had an agreement with Capcom to be able to release this game, and it was basically exclusive for a tiny bit of time, kind of like what we see with today's games.
If I remember correctly, like it was 2 years?
It was something like that, because by the time the Genesis port was released, we got Championship Edition, which was the new hot arcade cabinet at the time because they released that revision. And that's why I say, like, I can't really judge because, like, Championship Edition was amazing. And the same thing, it was very much, very faithful to what the arcade was. And that's why I really can't compare the two because it's two different revisions. It's like
True.
It's like an alpha versus a finished product.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I won't sit there and put the Super Nintendo version down at all because the Super Nintendo version is great. I enjoy it. It's Street Fighter. If anybody ever wants to play Street Fighter, I am totally up for Street Fighter. By the way, Joe Sucks 30 on Xbox. Yeah, like
You're talking about-
I am all about Street Fighter.
Yeah, you're talking about the new version, right? What's it, like Street Fighter 5? Like, is that what they're up to now?
Yep.
Okay. I've not played that one, but I have seen it online. But it looks pretty good. So
I played it for probably about a good month. I thankfully came in after they did all the patches and updates and all that stuff, so I actually had a story mode to play through. So that was good. Like I've enjoyed the franchise for what it is.
Same here. Like, I'm not like I'm not a huge fighting game fan, but but of course. But of course, Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, I played a lot of because of like very, very popular games.
Yeah.
But once again, I agree with you almost totally. I mean, Street Fighter 2 was a very excellent port. It was almost arcade perfect. Really. Minus the graphical and audio differences that the system was going to have.
Right.
It really was arcade perfect. It's like nowadays I found that version of the game to be too slow. I think Alpha Sport is like the faster gameplay.
Yep.
But when it came out, this was excellent. This was like this is the reason this game's called Super NES' killer app because this game literally sold millions of copies. This is like one of the most popular games in the system. And one of the most like widely sold. I think they even. It's been a while since I covered the game. So I covered the game, and because it's ad lib, I didn't do any research.
Yeah.
but I believe the Street Fighter 2 was packaged with Super NES like in some bundles. I do think it was available as a bundle console like at one point.
I could definitely see that.
But Street Fighter 2, excellent port. Probably the best arcade port up to that point on a system, I think. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait till down the line that we sit down and talk about Street Fighter Alpha because that game, I don't even know how that game came out on the Super Nintendo, and I'm sure there was some wizardry worked out, and like I'm sure that thing used extra chips and everything else, but like that is a game that should not have been released on the Super Nintendo, and it's got some slowdown, but it performs very, very well.
So like real quick as a party question, what's your favorite character to use?
It's always either Ryu or if available, M. Bison.
Okay, I tend to that's curious. I tend to favor I tend to favor like either Ken or Chun-Li depending on like who I'm facing against.
Okay.
But okay. Cool beans. So what's next?
Doom.
Yes,
So-
the infamous port of Doom.
My introduction to first-person shooters was Wolfenstein 3D. And
Mine too.
And it was basically this guy, was playing it down in his basement apartment in Providence and it was a guy my aunt knew, and he was like, "Hey," he's like, I want to check out this cool game, and like, I'm like watching him play, and like I'm just kind of like mesmerized by what I'm seeing, and he was like, "Do you want to play?" And I was, it's like his computer, so like I'm just like, no, kind of apprehensive, but obviously inside I'm like, yes, I want to play. And he was like, no, it's okay. He's like, you can play, and he's like, the game's real simple. He's like, you're a Jew and you're shooting Nazis. So it's got a bit of a personal connection. And like I loved Wolfenstein, and I used to like beg to go back to his house to be able to play Wolfenstein 3D. That being said, obviously Doom blew up and shaped what we know as the first-person shooter from like that point of its creation. Like it's almost like biblical terms. Like it's the creation of Doom, and then everything after can be traced back to Doom, even though Wolfenstein 3D did it first. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like Doom did it, Doom perfected it, and then you had like Quake and Heretic and stuff like that, and Hexen.
There's a very similar thing you can also say about like real-time strategy games. It was also like like Doom was the one that came first,
right?
And like and set the standard, and then Command and Conquer came out and predefined like tenfold, and like Command and Conquer was that franchise what Doom was to first-person shooters. Pretty much. So yep, that makes sense.
So that being said, man, I have played just about every port of Doom there is, and as much as I can appreciate, now you have to remember, obviously, I didn't grow up with the Super Nintendo, so don't crucify me, but this has got to be like one of the worst ports I've played. It's just like the tiniest little screen within a screen. Obviously, you don't really have the animations of the face, which is, some of the things I was used to from the PC port. Or the PC version, and like, I don't know. To me, I always felt like the difficulty was ramped up more than it was on the PC version, and they did a good job, trying to fit this game. Like, it's a miracle that this is almost like Street Fighter Alpha, where it's like it's a miracle this game even exists on the Super Nintendo, and at the same time, it's one of those that you kind of wish it hadn't been made for the Super Nintendo. I like it for what it is. Like, it's a novelty, but that's just it. Like, I'm not going to pick this up every day and be like, oh, I want to play Doom and end up playing the Super Nintendo version. Like, I'm going to play it on my PC, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
But it's Doom.
yeah, it is. So, I would probably not be quite. Yes, I probably would not be quite as harsh on the game as you are, but I do agree with you that it's definitely like kind of an inferior version. But I don't think it's the worst version of the game. So I don't know if you have an experience like with the Jaguar version. I think the Jaguar version is the worst personally, but
yeah, I haven't played the Jaguar version. I think that's the only version I haven't played, because even the 3DO one isn't that great.
The 3DO version is still better than this version is.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, none of the conversions are really any good. Like, if you want to play it on the PC.
I actually think the PlayStation version of the game looks very good.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
But the Saturn also had a decent port of the game too. So, but yeah, so it's like Doom definitely is the game. They definitely wanted Super NES because of how popular it was, and like and like you said, they tried. The game is like well programmed. It's just the limitations of the hardware in the system. It's like it's woefully apparent playing this version of the game.
Right.
It's like you said, and like limited screen size. You're slow, moving around. Because of the camera angles and the view and the draw distance being used, some enemies can shoot at you while you can't like, shoot at them. Right. So I don't think the difficulty of the game is any harder. I think it's just because of limitations that makes the game harder itself.
Right.
And trying to play it. Having said that, it is a playable version of Doom. If all you had a Super NES, you can play Doom on this fine and have fun with it.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely like a challenge. The best thing going for this version of the game is the music. The soundtrack. Yes. The soundtrack in this version of the game is excellent.
Yes.
It's a very, very good soundtrack.
That I can definitely agree with.
I mean, probably one of the best renditions of the Doom stuff on the Doom music.
Yeah.
Like on this hardware. So. But yeah, I mean the game sold well. This is also one of the only Super NES games to have like a custom cart shell.
Yeah. This in Maximum Carnage.
Yes.
Yep.
So definitely stands out in the store. But,
and Killer Instinct had a custom shell as well.
That's true. Yep.
Which
yes, it did,
is also the next game we're going to talk about.
well, let's get to it then.
This one. I love Killer Instinct. I'm just going to throw that out there. This is one of those, like, set up at the kiosk at Sears. This is how I played this game. I didn't even play this in the arcade. I played it on the Super Nintendo first.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Rhode Island Mall back in the day had Aladdin's Castle on the second floor, and it was kind of outdated. The Warwick Mall was really the mall you wanted to be at because they had Tilt, and Tilt had all the newer games. So Aladdin's Castle was usually where we went because it had a good mix of the old school Konami beat 'em ups, and they still had a Street Fighter cabinet, more than one Street Fighter cabinet, which was important because everybody was playing Street Fighter. So they never got Killer Instinct, and years later, I want to say it was at least almost 2 years later, Tilt got a Killer Instinct cabinet, and they had Killer Instinct Gold, well, Killer Instinct 2, right next to it. So it was like one of those, like, hey, we finally got the system, but oh yeah, by the way, they have a new game out. But I love the creativity of this game. All the characters like make sense for this world that it's in. It is unashamed of the fact that it is a mashup of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Like it wears its Street Fighter influences on its sleeve, from Orchid's blade throw and what's his name, Glacier being able to fly up through the bottom and uppercut people. Like, it's got that fantastical fighting style of like Mortal Kombat, but it's like you could tell the roots of Street Fighter all the way. They introduced the combo system, which was pretty cool. Like, I remember. So that's how I was attracted to this in Sears. So we were coming up the escalator. The way the old Sears was set up in the Rhode Island Mall is they had an escalator on either side. They were kind of together, and one goes up, one goes down. And when you were about halfway up onto the second floor, all you could hear was either like the Super Mario World theme song, usually something along the lines of like not Street Fighter, Donkey Kong Country, or F-Zero. But this time, like, I'm hearing like Combo Breaker and, and things like that. I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, it's like this just announcer shouting at you. And as soon as we got to the top, I see these kids playing Killer Instinct, and of course, I had a cool black cartridge, which made me even more so want a Super Nintendo. I remember that specific trip, I definitely begged my parents for a Super Nintendo. I think I ended up getting Sonic 3 out of it, so I guess it wasn't a complete loss. But
Sonic 3 was a good game.
Yeah, I didn't get a Super Nintendo, but they kind of shut me up with Sonic 3. So so there's that.
That's Sonic 2, I think, but still like a good
game.
Yeah.
So my best friend named his son after one of the characters, Cinder, in this game.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. I told him that he was going to regret that because his kid was probably going to be teased, being called like Cinderella or whatever else. But in the end, he's I think 6 months older than my son, and my son actually has been friends with them. They've been friends since they were little, but time separates all people, and we lost touch. And then my son 5 years ago was like, hey, I'm working at Wendy's. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, yeah, you're never gonna believe who I work with. And I was like, who? And he's like, Cinder. And I was like, holy shit. But yeah, it was one of those things, like, the world is small, and you learn how small it is. But yeah, I could play this game over and over and over and over. And when they made the remake for the Xbox One, like, that was the seller for me. Like that.
Oh yeah.
I was head first, like, because of all the controversy that Xbox had, or Microsoft had, with the Xbox One. I was firmly behind the PS4. firmly behind it. I was so ready to pick up a PS4, and then they announced Killer Instinct, and I said, "Oh, I gotta wait." And I had to wait for Microsoft to clean up their act so that I could pick up the Xbox One. But yeah,
I never played that version of the game. Like, how is it?
it's really good. It's really good. I enjoy it. Now that I have the new PC, I really want to install it on my PC and see how it runs. But you know, it's great. There's still a bit of an online community there, which is nice. It's a bunch of diehard Killer Instinct fans. And they're pretty good. I've run into some people who will just slaughter you. But then there's others who realize that you aren't good at the game and kind of don't go full bore on you. And kind of make it competitive and you can enjoy yourself. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, no, once again, I agree with... once again, we're not... Once again, I agree with almost everything you're saying. We're not doing this on purpose. It's just like, Joe and I seem to be a very, like, similar mindsets on this stuff. Like I just said, I'm not a huge fighting game fan, but Killer Instinct is a game that I played a lot of. I have experience with the arcade version of the game because this game came out when I was in college.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so one semester, our game room like in the student union had Killer Instinct in it. So
Super
so I played it
jealous.
a lot. But so I never never played the Super NES version of the game until years later. Years later, by emulation.
Yeah.
But once again, this is almost an arcade perfect
Yeah,
port.
yeah.
But Rare made the game. Rare knew. Yeah, but Rare knows their stuff.
Right.
Because, it really is an excellent fighting game. And yeah, it is kind of newbie friendly because this is a game you actually can do fairly well at
Button matching.
just like button mashing. Like you don't have to. Obviously the combos help.
Right.
But you actually get decently in the game without having to know that.
Yeah,
So,
and this is another one of those, like, I was talking about the Mortal Kombat Street Fighter 2 mashup thing. Like, if you know special moves from Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat, you can input those commands, and more than likely, your character is going to do something, which makes it even more friendly.
Yeah. But Mortal Kombat. I do know Mortal Kombat was bundled with Super NES systems because I remember seeing it in the store back in the day. So, so this was also a very, very popular game. So yeah, Mortal Kombat was definitely another system seller, I'm sure. Not to the same degree Street Fighter 2, but I think that Mortal Kombat definitely was a very and because it was a Nintendo franchise at least back then. Now I think Rare has the rights to it these days. Well, Microsoft.
No, Microsoft owns it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Microsoft bought Rare like several years ago, so I keep forgetting. Yes, I keep forgetting about that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the Killer Instinct bundle is like the one I was trying to get my parents to buy me. I totally wanted that black cart and the Super Nintendo so bad.
Yeah. Once again, for Street Fighter 2, it's very, very impressive they were able to port the game onto the Super NES almost perfectly.
Yeah.
But the arcade game did use some technology that eventually went on to be used for just like the N64.
Yeah.
Most people know about that story by now, but so they actually had to downgrade the game a little bit for Super NES to make it work, and they still did a great job at it because Rare was. Next Nintendo, Rare was the best at making games on the system. I mean, just look at Star Fox. So Rare knew what they were doing. So anybody else, maybe not quite as perfect, but we were in good hands with that. So definitely excellent conversion. But the Rhode Island Mall, I remember that place too, because Joe and I don't live. Yeah, Joe and I don't live that far apart from one another. So, when I first moved to Rhode Island in 2001, the Rhode Island Mall was still pretty active.
Yeah.
But, I last went there. I last went there about 10 years ago to get my driver's license renewed because the DMV still had an office there at the time. So, is the mall totally closed at this point? I don't even know.
As a mall, it is totally closed. It's now just a bunch of different stores that have blocked off sections of the mall to become whatever they are.
Got it.
Yeah, they got Dick's Sporting Good. They got Kohl's, Walmart, Burlington Coat Factory.
Yeah.
I think there's something else over there, but
Some of those have been there for
yeah,
some of those. Yeah, some of the stores were there a long, long time ago.
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Like, some of them were anchor stores,
Yep.
but
So.
yeah, but cool enough. Okay, so 2 fighting games in a row, which is fine. But so what do you have next for us?
well, some people would consider it still a fighter, but it's not a fighter. It's a beat 'em up. Turtles in Time. So,
yes.
Turtles in Time. I don't have to say anything to praise this game because everybody knows how good this game is. What you want to hear is the fact that I had the Hyperstone heist and thought that I was being ripped off by not having Turtles in Time. Little did I know how similar the games actually were and yet so different at the same time.
True.
So I have a lot of love for Hyperstone Heist, but also I had a lot of envy for Turtles in Time for the longest time. I enjoy Turtles in Time. It's not as good as the arcade game. This one feels shorter. I could be wrong, but Turtles in Time feels shorter to me than the arcade version. But if I remember correctly, all the sound effects are there. All the voiceover stuff was there. The humor was still intact. And like I said, I think almost all the levels were there. If it was missing any, it was like 1 or 2. But it's Turtles in Time, man. You get to be the Ninja Turtles beating the foot soldiers up and riding pterodactyls and like weird dinosaur things. It's such a good game.
Yes, I also love like Turtles in Time. This is definitely like my favorite games on the system. So yeah, so I'm also a big Turtles fan. So like I definitely played all the Turtles games like when they came out. I even I played and beat the Turtles NES game, which is very hard.
Yeah.
It's not a great game, but it's still like but I still think it's a decent game. I have a lot of nostalgia for it. But the original Turtles arcade game was a great game. I spent so much money like in arcades on that game. But yeah, and the NES port of the game was lacking in some areas, but it's still a very good port because they had because like the NES obviously was an inferior system. They did it, they coded it, but they had like 2 stages to stay onto the game and whatnot. So, but Turtles in Time, man, this is like an arcade perfect game. So, I actually this actually is an area of like we're gonna like I disagree because I think the console game is actually better than the arcade version of the game because the console version of the game, yes, yes, they did make some changes, but they actually added on to. They actually added on to stuff here, like the version of the game. So like some of the like Bebop and Rocksteady, for example, were changed around some. Some of the enemies were added in, like for example, like Ransom, what's his name, and Technodrome. They were not in the arcade version of the game, so because it's not any shorter. I think maybe you're kind of thinking it's shorter because the Super NES version of the game is actually like a bit faster than the arcade version of the game. But yeah, minus the graphical and sound differences. The arcade, I actually prefer the arcade games. The arcade game is great, but I actually prefer the console version of the game because the changes that they made to it. So the only thing it doesn't have, unfortunately, is 4-player mode, which obviously couldn't be done because, well, I mean, there was a multi-tap for the Super NES that could have done it, but they didn't.
Right.
Probably just because of the hardware limitations. So, but yeah, Turtles in Time is like an excellent game. One of my favorite Super NES games. Like great characters, great graphics, great music. Like a lot of moves. The throwing the enemy into the screen move is also unique in the Super NES version of the game because you couldn't do that like an arcade version of the game. So, because that uses like Mode 7 tricks. So, and yeah, Hyperstone Heist actually uses half the stages from Turtles in Time, which I didn't know about. Until like years later. So they actually just like reskinned half the stages to Turtles in Time by the game. So you So really, like, you weren't being like ripped off. But yeah, Hyperzone Heist is also like a good game like its own right. Joe and I were saying off mic, Konami had the resources and the time to make games tailor the system's strengths, and they actually made like good games for all systems, regardless of what the system was, because they actually had the resources to do that. They didn't have to rely upon straight ports. So Capcom 2, like we were saying earlier. So, but yeah, TMNT 4 Turtles in Time is still a game I play on a regular basis. It just, I was psyched for the Xbox remake when that came out 7 years ago. It sucks.
Yeah.
It's not a very good version of the game at all, unfortunately. But it's because they didn't have the rights to they didn't have the rights to music or anything like that. So it's
Right.
like it just reshelled that version of the game's called. Ubisoft published it. It's just not a good game.
Yeah.
It's just not a good version of the game at all.
I have it for the PS3, and it's. I mean, I love that I can still download it today and play it if I absolutely wanted to. But I'm not doing that anytime soon.
So who's your favorite? So who's your favorite the turtle player house?
So it's always either Leonardo or Donatello.
Really? Same
Yep.
here. So 90% of the time, like Leonardo, I just use Donatello occasionally, like to mix it up.
Yeah.
So, I do wish the game did. I do wish the game had differences with the turtles, like out of the NES game. Because all the turtles pretty play the same, unfortunately. But having said that, they're still like, turtles are still like a lot of fun to use.
Yeah.
So, So great pick, great game. Still like a fun game to. Still a fun game to play like these days. So, all right. So, what's your last pick there, Joe?
All right. So speaking of Mode 7, last pick is my introduction to the series, Super Castlevania 4.
We're going from one great game to another great game.
So, Super Castlevania 4 has an interesting story with me. So I obviously grew up with the NES. I knew what Castlevania was, but I never owned any of the games. I don't even remember any of my friends having any of the games, so it's like I never had any exposure.
That's weird because those are like very popular
Right.
games.
So it was around this time that we had moved from basically one end of the complex. So it was old Navy housing. So it was a bunch of cul-de-sacs in a circle. And so, like, we moved from, like, one half of it to the other half. And when we moved to the other half, my new neighbor had a Super Nintendo. And I remember going over there and kind of trying to make friends and whatever else. Find out he has a Super Nintendo. And in the Super Nintendo already was Super Castlevania. And it was one of those like, oh, well, let's just hit power and we'll play this, because I was just excited that he's got a Super Nintendo. And wow, like that experience with that game, like I love the fact that it's now I know it's traditional Castlevania, but at the time, like, to me, it's a beat 'em up in which you're walking left and right to do what you got to do, but you can actually whip like diagonally. You can whip up. To be able to whip in all 8 directions was pretty cool, and
that was unique to the game. They did not use that in any other games, unfortunately, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
But the whipping 8 directions is awesome.
So I mean, and then as you go on, like the Mode 7 tricks that they pull off to make things rotate and move.
The rotating background
Yeah,
stage. Oof.
I mean, visually, it's amazing, especially to see at that time. But I have to say, like, as an adult, I was kind of upset to find out that it's basically, I mean, it's not, but it is, like, kind of like a remake of the first game.
Yeah,
It's like a soft reboot
Yeah.
for Konami.
Yeah.
So, like, going back and, like, playing the NES games, later on in life, and then coming back to this game, it just felt like I was retreading familiar ground, just with a new twist. But I still prefer, like, I I love Castlevania 3. That's probably my favorite. That's probably everybody's favorite outside of this game. And this would be my number 2. I really enjoyed this. It was because of my experience with this game that I ended up getting Bloodlines for the Genesis. So
Also a great game.
That's a fantastic game. And, it all comes back to this particular game. Like, if it wasn't for this game, I wouldn't have picked up Bloodlines. If I hadn't picked up Bloodlines and put so much time into it, I would have never went and looked at Castlevania 1, 2, or 3. And I wouldn't have played the wonderful games that came out after Symphony of the Night, the ones that came out for the Game Boy Advance and the DS. It's definitely a franchise that I wish Konami wouldn't at the moment ignore, but they are.
Yeah. well, Konami's pretty much Konami's pretty much like done with like console games anyway right now anyway.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But
They're kind of trash at the moment.
there were a couple Castlevania games like the Castlevania games that played in arcades. There was Castlevania Versus, and there was a Vampire Killer, which kind of reskinning the first game. But I don't think a lot of American players saw those games.
Okay, I was gonna say, have you played Vampire Killer? Because Vampire Killer is not good.
I've not played it in the arcade. I never saw it in the arcade. I have played the game in emulation since then.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I've played it in emulation. Obviously, I've never seen a cabinet, but the same thing. Like, I mean, the gameplay is not good.
Yeah, this is one of the like rare cases like which the console games actually like jumped over like arcades, which is interesting. It's usually the other way around. So, but once again, Joe and I are going to disagree like a little bit here. I actually flip-flop those games. Super Castlevania 4 to me is still my favorite game in the franchise, period, hands down. With Castlevania 3 coming in second. So, and then probably Symphony of the Night, and then probably like down from after that. But yeah, I've always been a huge Castlevania fan ever since I first played Castlevania on the NES as a kid. So, I really do love the old style Metroidvania style games that came out much later on the handhelds. But yeah, Super Castlevania 4, what an awesome game! It's like, this is probably not only my favorite. This is probably not only one of my favorite games on the system. It's probably my top 10 list of games, favorite games period of all time for me. The game to me is that good because it's like, I told the story before in the past. I was like, I got, I bought the game just before I went in for wisdom teeth surgery, and I was like, laid up in bed all week healing from that, and just like had the system and the TV set up. Just next to be in the bedroom, in the bed, just playing this Street Fighter 2 all week. So, lots of my memories associated with it because of that. It's an awesome game. I mean, yes, it's kind of a reskinning of the first game, but the game's different enough because of the weapons, the whip control, the stages. It's like it's a hard game, but not like punishing hard.
Right.
It's still like a challenging game, but you still can get through the game with a password system like whatnot. And there are bonus stages where you can find like extra lives and whatnot. So, the music. Oh god, the music in this game is just so good. The soundtrack in this is like amazing. Yeah. It's like I would argue this is probably the best soundtrack on the system, bar none. Yeah. Because they really knew how to make that sound chip sing with this game. It's like the wide variety of music they have in this game is just awesome. And like hearing classic, hearing at the end of the game, hearing the remixes of like Bloody Tears and like Flame Beginnings is so good. But it's a hard game, not the hardest game in the series, but definitely it's like a challenging, fun game. Just like. Yeah, the most epic graphics at the start of the game. It's like I already knew the before the in front of behind trick because thanks to Super Mario World. But the whole start of the game was like okay, I can go behind the screen to like get these items. She was so cool. Yeah. So, boss fights are great. Like I really cannot say much. I really cannot say enough good things about this game. The only knocks that I'm gonna give about the game is that Simon is kind of like slow and sluggish and still hard to use sometimes. And like some of the game can be kind of cheap in areas. So it's like there are areas where like there are areas where you're gonna die again and again and again because you keep finding the power down right. So. And of course, the U.S. version of the game, they censored some, it's acid instead of blood, etc., etc. Right. But But still, like, a great platformer all around. It still holds up very well today, I think. It's just like, this is like the epitome of like Super NES games, and it came out so early in the systems that it came out early too. I mean, like early, late '91 for Japan. So it's like so for a game this impressive to come out this early in the systems, this early in the system's lifespan. It's like this game and Contra 3 are games I showed to kids back then to be like, okay, this is what the Super NES can do, because the game's that good. So, but yeah, so. At least you got Bloodlines. Bloodlines is also an excellent game in its own right. Maybe not as graphically impressive, but still like a very like fun game, and they did some very cool things that game with like changing characters and whatnot. So, Super Castlevania 4, awesome game. Great pick. We will cover Dracula X at some point too on the podcast. The follow-up, the Super NES version of the game is very different, but still like a fun game, I think. Spoilers, but. But anyway, yeah. So awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always fun. Like I said before, it's always fun to talk about Super NES games with somebody who doesn't have the same experience or depth of the games that I do. Yeah. So, those are all games we definitely would have covered on the podcast if they hadn't. If they already had them covered. So, I mean, we could have gone back and revisited them a la Chrono Trigger, but I think this format is fine. Yeah. So because none of these games like RPGs, so it's like but
right. What are we gonna do? Like go in depth analysis of each individual character, like in like Street Fighter? Like people have done that. People have already done that. Go look for that.
They have done that. Yes, there's numerous podcasts out there. There's numerous podcasts out there which have already done that. So, but anyway, so awesome. All right. Well, thank you again as always. I appreciate it. If you want to leave me feedback, comments, suggestions, you can send me an email to the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com, or you'll also find us on Facebook. Joe, so where can they contact you?
You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30. Also, I do have Facebook, so come find me.
Awesome. Sounds good. So next time on the podcast, we're having another guest host with us. If everything goes well, hopefully. We're going to be joined by Liam, who's also been on the podcast before in the past, talking about a game I've not played before on the system. So I'm familiar with the franchise. I've just never played this game. Pop and Twinbee, which is also another Japanese exclusive game. Shooter game a la Gradius. Do you have any experience with this game or the franchise like at all, Joe?
I do not.
Okay. Yeah, I think you enjoyed it. It's a fun game. So, at least the games the franchise I've played have been fun. Like I said, I've not played this version of the game.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we'll get into it next time. So, anyway, thanks again as always thanks again everybody out there for joining us. We appreciate it as always. Be well, stay safe. Catch you again next time.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.